Welcome back, guys, to the first unit, Unit 1. If you're watching this video, I suppose you should have watched the first two videos for preliminaries that included things like how to save a project and navigating Visual Studio and all of that. So please, and if you haven't, just go to Ulink, you'll find the video there and you can watch it. So the style this time around is slightly different. In previous years, you would actually have some theoretical concepts on the slides, and when it's time for tests, you'll be tested on those theories, like a lot of tests, like the section A of our test. If you were here in previous years, you know what I'm talking about. That would ask you about multiple choice questions, about definitions, and probably similar things. But now, since we've gone completely online, the nature of our exams will be different. In this case, we are not even writing exams, we are writing only graded labs. So you will not have to remember or memorize anything. In that case, the slides now, I have removed the text from it. I've separated this text into another aspect. I call it readings. So every week you're going to get readings because this knowledge is still very important for you to be able to get a clear picture of what we are about to do. So every week I'm going to give you readings, and they'll be like in form of lab sheets, and there'll be concepts and definitions in it. You can read it on your own, but they will not be tested. Then you also get practice. Because this module is heavily based on practice, there'll be things that I will demonstrate for you, but then I'll give you extra practice on those things. Then coupled with the normal tutorials and the graded labs. That's how we're going to play. So, you're welcome to the unit. I'm going to be talking, this is Unit 1. We're going to be talking a bunch of things that are theory, like I said, but those things are things that you can access in your readings that I'm going to release later in the week. So guys, you're welcome. So getting started is one of the things I'm going to talk about briefly. What is .NET Framework? Again, that falls on the readings. There are many things in the readings, but I'm going to mention some things very briefly. Visual Studio, you've watched my first two videos, so there's some examples on how you can navigate Visual Studio. .NET and Visual Studio, how it all comes together, and introduction to C#, where we can begin to write some simple programs. All right, getting started. Again, getting started and installation, all of those things, please refer to your practice sheets. I'm going to release them tomorrow. Okay, you might be watching this video anytime. So I'm going to release them this week of this thing, and you can follow up the practice. So what is .NET? Again, you have to refer to reading in this case. .NET Framework is just a bunch of libraries with infrastructures. So think of a place where you can run different programming languages. Remember in Python, you could only have Python programs. In fact, you have Python 3 programs specifically, and if you wrote Python 2 programs, it will not to give you an error under Tony with Tony compiler. In this case, you have an environment where you could write C# if you wanted, you could write F#, you could write VB.NET, and everything could be compiled together. And that thing that makes that happen is called .NET Framework. It has different components, and I'm going to discuss that later in the slides. So, Visual Studio, again, it's an IDE. I've shown you guys a couple of that. Refer to reading for a lot of things about Visual Studio. .NET and Visual Studio have come a long way, and since 2002, that was the first release of .NET Framework version 1.0. There's been a lot of development, as you can see. For the sake of knowledge, I encourage you to please read about this so that you can have a complete knowledge, not that you can code but you don't even know what you're coding on. So I put a link here, it's straight to Wikipedia. Please feel free, by all means, just click on it and have fun. So this is called Common Language Infrastructure here. So it also gives you kind of like a picture of what .NET Framework is all about. So in this case, you can see you can have your C# code. And you can have your VB.NET code. You can have your J# code. And in .NET Framework, there are many more languages. You're going to see that. And these languages, you can have associated compilers for them on that platform. That's the infrastructure. And these things are compiled into a common similar language. We call it Common Intermediate Language. All right, in form of, think of like an assembly language. And then they are sent to a compiler now that's virtual. We call that guy CLR, Common Language Runtime. And that compiler now turns everything to machine language that the computer understands, executes it, and comes back to you regardless of whichever code you are writing in. Visual Studio is so powerful, and at the back, Visual Studio, what you see with your eyes, at the back is .NET Framework, which is the bunch of libraries and infrastructure and everything. And the good thing is, you can even have a project that has different languages at the same time. So in the solution of Visual Studio, you can have one project that is C#, another project that is VB.NET. But we're going to see all of that as we proceed. Here are the components of .NET Framework stack over the years from 2.0 to 4.5. Again, this is just for knowledge sake. I will not ask you to write a lab where you have to remember this, but I would like you to just explore this knowledge, read about it, so that you can understand what is going on. And every time there was an improvement in .NET Framework, there were newly introduced technologies every time. And 4.5 was the last time that stuff was introduced to the stack. However, afterwards, there's been many other upgrades in .NET Framework. However, there were new things that were introduced to the stack in 4.5, which was in 2012. So, what are the languages in the .NET Framework? I can tell you of two now. VB.NET, C#. Those two are almost the most popular ones. There are many more languages, and again, please refer to the reading sheets where you can see more languages for the .NET Framework. The question now is, which programming language should I learn? I'm thinking that question always comes up at some point. I'm not sure if I've discussed it with you guys in 1A before, but one of the biggest challenges for a young programmer coming out of varsity is, what should I learn? What should I learn? Especially with the Coursera licenses you guys have this year. What should I learn? There's so much things to learn out there. You're almost confused. Some of you guys have written to me to say, what should I learn? Now, this is the answer to that question. It's a philosophical question, and I have a philosophical response to it. My response is, if you were to travel to a township in KZN, and you have the option of learning languages before you go there, which of these languages would you learn? If you're asked to pick only two. So there's English, there's Zulu, there's Afrikaans, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Chinese, or Mandarin, or Arabic. Well, if it was a classroom section, I'll take questions from you, I'll take responses from you, but my previous years, many students always answered the same. They will say, since it's KZN, it's likely going to be Zulu and English, which makes sense because think of it, in South Africa, most people can speak English. However, Zulu is the core language that the natives in KZN speak the most. So the whole idea now, the answer to that question of which language should you learn is this. It's not first about the language, it's about knowing what to say to a computer. So we go back to algorithms. You remember from 1A, every time you figured out how to do it in the lab, you always had your slides next to you. And if you forgot how to do anything like a loop or like a for loop or a while loop, you can look it up. You also had your notebook next to you. In real life, you're going to have resources like that. You're going to have Stack Overflow and all of that. But the problem is when you cannot solve a problem. When you don't understand which algorithm is appropriate, or how to design an algorithm, how to weave these things together. The if statement, the for loop, you don't know what's needed, then you don't even know what to say to a computer. It doesn't matter which programming language you know. You may learn Java and memorize the whole of Java, and yet you cannot code. So the ability to know what to say, which is algorithms or semantics or logic, is the top thing that you need to know. And this is my own personal response, and many people will tell you the same thing based on their experience. And secondly, if you are thinking of a market and you know the most used technologies in that market, you should probably learn those technologies. It gives you the edge because most people want to employ developers that are ready to go, that they don't have to take time to learn. So in South African context, for example, in IT companies in South Africa, C#, Java, and VB.NET is very prominent because I have a couple of consulting portfolios and I know what's going on out there. For the web, most times you use ASP.NET, which is active server pages, and sometimes you use PHP with MySQL at the back. So those are things that you may look at. And it's always nice to be multilingual too. When I try to put together all of the languages that I can speak, or when I say speak now, I don't mean natural languages, I mean programming languages that I've either spoken before or currently I can speak. It's about 46 of them. So I can program in all of those languages, and it gives me advantage when I look at code to be able to understand quickly. Also an advantage when I step into a new terrain, or as a lecturer, if I get a new module, I don't feel off because I know what's going on in that language. So you have to be aware though of what is called style of speech. In programming terms, we call it paradigm. So a programming paradigm is it's the style. So the different paradigms are things I mentioned it to you guys in one, if you remember. Procedural paradigm, for example, is programs that run from top to bottom. Then you have object-oriented paradigm, like we're going to be looking at in C#, which your program is now abstracted into classes, and these classes are interacting with one another. You have other paradigms that I don't want to bug you about now, but you can also read about programming paradigms. Across languages, when the paradigm is similar, it's easier to understand what's going on. But when the paradigm is different, for example, a very strange paradigm to you guys would be functional programming paradigm. Extremely different. Functional programming uses different kind of designs. So if you learned Java and you want to learn a functional programming language, you might struggle a little bit to get yourself going. Then ultimately, it's nice for you guys to know that there are translators that exist. So what that means is that you don't have to. Let me see if I can show you guys a translator right now. Give it a second. So what that means is that you don't have to actually learn a new language every time. Okay, so here's an online translator. It's by a company called Telerik. So Telerik allows you to put your C# code here and get a VB.NET code. So it means that language is really not a problem. In fact, most of my honor students and master students in previous years have been able to build what I call special purpose compilers that do things like this, like translation of language from one programming language to another programming language, or from graphical specification to a language, from a drawing to an SQL, on things like that. So people are working on those tools. You don't have to worry about them. Your own worry should be focused on algorithms, and at any point in time, make sure that your programming language that you've chosen is potent enough, strong enough to undo real life problems and many problems. So here's an example. If I put a line in C#, you don't have to worry what this line means because you're still getting started with C#. Actually, I'm declaring I as an integer and I click convert. It's going to give me the VB.NET version. VB.NET, this is called dimension I as integer. All right. And I can edit this and click convert code, and I get that dimension integer equals 3. So my point, translators exist. You don't have to worry about language most of the time. Visual Studio features. In Visual Studio, there are so many moving parts. For those of you guys that play video games and you are so used to many moving parts, you probably will not struggle a lot, but some people need concentration. So Visual Studio, if you've seen in my previous examples, those 2 videos I shared, I liked to close things by the panel so that it's clear. However, there are many small windows all around Visual Studio. You have IDEs for languages, you have server explorers where you can access things like databases, you have integrated browsers right inside Visual Studio, you have solution explorers. There are many things going on, so we're going to take it one step at a time, and that shouldn't be a problem. There are a lot of, like I said, there are hundreds of functionalities in Visual Studio. You may never ever in your career finish learning this because Microsoft keeps coming up with new things every time. To get started, however, it's very easy. This week we're going to get started. We're going to have a graded lab and we're going to have fun. So many developers throughout their careers have never actually had to use all of the features. Personally, I have been using Visual Studio since 2004, 2005, and that is about 16 years ago. And I've never finished using all of the features in Visual Studio. I have used only the things that I needed to use on every project I've worked on. So introduction to C#, quickly. Let's see what C# is all about. I think I would slice the video into 2 now, and I'll see you guys in the next video.